Welcome. My name is David Kadish, and I'm here to present a paper called Adapting to a Changing Environment on behalf of myself and Sebastian Risi. This paper is part of a series of experiments that simulate how animal calls are shaped within a soundscape. It follows a paper at last year's Alife conference, which looked at how two species in a soundscape might differentiate their calls from one another. Here, we focused on a different aspect of animal sonification. Ecosystems are changing at a rapid pace. One of the things that has changed is the amount of human-caused noise, or anthrophony. With these experiments, we wanted to try to understand how animals might change their calls in response to such noise. Our soundscape model breaks the audio spectrum into 9 discrete bands, or channels. Senders and receivers are evolved using Neuroevolution of Augmenting Topologies, and their fitness is based on the ability of a receiver population to understand the senders. With this model, we ran 5 experiments. Experiments 1 and 2 test how randomly generated populations evolve communication strategies, but the soundscape in Experiment 1 is noise-free, while the soundscape in Experiment 2 has noise on the first 3 channels. You can see from these modified spectrograms that plot the average channel use in each generation over the 50 runs of the experiment, that the noise on channels 0 to 2 in Experiment 2 inhibits the use of those channels. Experiments 3A, B, and C tested the response of a population to the sudden onset of noise. For the first 300 generations, those populations evolved in a noise-free environment, and then noise was added to channels 0, 1, and 2 at generation 300. The main difference between the experiments is which channels their populations are using when the noise begins at generation 300. The population in Experiment 3A is not using any of the noisy channels, and so it doesn't really change its behavior. In Experiment 3B, the population is using channel 2 before the noise begins. Once the noise started, many of its runs stopped using channel 2 and often switched to a new channel, but they were inconsistent, with some switching to channel 3, others to channel 5, and still others to channels 7 or 8. In Experiment 3C, channels 0 and 2 are both in use when the noise begins. Most runs stopped using channel 2 and switched to channel 6 instead, but almost none of them stopped using channel 0. We've seen how noise impacts the communication patterns of populations, but what does it do to their fitness? Looking at the first set of experiments, the noise-free populations in Experiment 1 have a higher fitness than those with noise in Experiment 2. When noise was introduced to a previously noise-free environment in Experiments 3A, B, and C, it had a pronounced negative impact when the noise occurred on channels that were already in use, as in Experiments 3B and C. These violin plots show the fitness levels in a slightly different way. Represented here are the average fitness from all of the runs of each experiment in each of the last 150 generations. We can see how the fitnesses are distributed once the populations have had time to adjust to their environments. Note that the most fit populations from each experiment are similar, but the distributions differ widely. This means that the noise didn't prevent the possibility of high fitness, only the likelihood that it would be achieved in each experiment. These plots show the population diversity and the average neural network complexity for the populations in Experiments 3A, B, and C. Here, we noted a relationship between the diversity of senders in Experiment 3B and the diversity of communication strategies that were found in the runs of that experiment. We also observed a shift in the patterns of complexity as the environment became noisy. We were able to draw a number of conclusions from our analysis of the 5 experiments. Populations tend to move away from channels with noise. The presence of noise on channels in use degrades the ability of populations to reach the highest level of fitness. The onset of noise tends to halt the growth of sender neural network complexity and stimulate the steady growth of receiver neural network complexity. Further work could help to clarify the relationship between population diversity and complexity and the ability of populations to respond to environmental noise. Thank you for listening to this talk. I hope you get the chance to take a look at our poster, and I'll be available in the Zoom room if you'd like to chat in person.